Welcome to our peaceful corner of the internet, where stories are here to help you drift off to a place of rest and calm. Tonight we invite you to settle down, let go of the day's worries, and sink into a soothing bedtime story crafted just for you. Each word, each scene is carefully designed to help your mind unwind, your body relax, and your thoughts slow down. So, find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and let the story gently guide you to a restful night's sleep. Close your eyes, listen closely, and let tonight's journey begin. Claire had always been a night wanderer. On this particular evening, she found herself drifting further than usual, her footsteps echoing on the empty streets of the city. It was a cold night, and a thin veil of mist clung to the cobblestones. There was an air of something unusual, something she couldn't quite place, tugging her along through narrow alleys and forgotten corners. As she walked, the city's familiar sounds began to fade, replaced by a strange, distant humming. Claire glanced around, puzzled. She hadn't noticed how deserted the streets had become, nor the turn she'd taken to end up here. In front of her, an iron archway loomed out of the fog, overgrown with ivy and rusted with age. It was a small gate, almost hidden between two tall buildings she didn't recognize. Above the archway, barely visible, was a faded sign, platform 13.5. Claire blinked, her heart skipping a beat. She'd lived in this city her whole life and never heard of such a place. Curiosity pricked at her mind. She knew she should turn back, but something about the eerie stillness of the air and the soft glow of lamplight beyond the gate pulled her in. She pushed open the gate, its hinges creaking loudly in the silence, and stepped through. Instantly, the world seemed to change. The mist thickened, wrapping around her like a soft blanket. The familiar city sounds were gone now, replaced by the distant rhythmic chugging of a train. She found herself standing on an old platform, worn with age and covered in moss. The space was dimly lit by flickering gas lamps, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the fog. Before she could make sense of her surroundings, a deep whistle pierced the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of an approaching train. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She peered down the tracks, squinting to see through the mist. Her eyes widened as a vintage steam locomotive, dark and majestic, emerged from the fog. The train was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Its carriages were painted a deep, midnight blue, trimmed with gleaming gold. The engine puffed out thick, white steam, which swirled around the platform like a ghostly cloud. It slowed to a halt in front of her, the ground vibrating beneath her feet as it settled. Above the engine, written in elegant, looping script, was the name Night Train to Anywhere. The door to the nearest carriage creaked open slowly, almost invitingly. Claire hesitated, her pulse racing. This had to be a dream, didn't it? There was no way a secret train station existed in the middle of the city, especially one that seemed to have stepped out of another time. Yet the scent of smoke and coal was sharp in the air, mixing with the cool night breeze. She could feel the faint heat radiating from the engine, and the quiet clinking of metal was unmistakably real. She took a step closer, peering inside the carriage. The interior was dimly lit, with plush, velvet seats and warm, glowing lamps casting a soft, golden light. Claire glanced back at the empty street she had left behind. It was strange. She couldn't quite see the city anymore, only a wall of swirling mist. The archway she had walked through seemed to have disappeared entirely. There was nothing but fog, the platform, and the train. A voice, soft yet authoritative, broke the silence. "All aboard! The night train to Anywhere, departing soon." Claire jumped, turning toward the source of the voice. An old conductor stood by the open door, dressed in a crisp, dark uniform with brass buttons that gleamed in the dim light. He tipped his hat to her, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Going somewhere, miss?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with a knowing look. Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea where this train was headed or why it had appeared in front of her. Everything about the situation screamed at her to turn around and leave, but at the same time she felt a strange pull, as if the train was calling to her, whispering promises of adventure, of the unknown. I don't have a ticket," she stammered. The conductor chuckled, a low, comforting sound. "Oh, we don't sell tickets here. You simply need the desire to go anywhere." Claire swallowed hard. Was she really considering this? The sensible part of her mind screamed that this was ridiculous, dangerous even. But another part of her, the part that had led her to wander the city streets at night, was already stepping forward. Without allowing herself time to second guess, Claire nodded. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll board." The conductor's smile widened, and he stepped aside, holding the door open for her. "Very good, miss. Welcome aboard." Claire took a deep breath and stepped into the carriage. The warmth of the interior wrapped around her, soothing her nerves. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and she felt the train lurch as it began to move. She made her way to a window seat, peering out as the platform slipped away into the mist. The city was gone now, replaced by an endless expanse of fog. It was as if the train had entered another world entirely. Claire leaned back in her seat, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and fear. The rhythmic chugging of the engine, the swaying of the carriage, and the soft glow of the lamps all lulled her into a sense of calm. She didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in a long time it didn't matter. She was on the night train to anywhere, and that was enough. The Night Train to Anywhere. Episode 2. The Conductor's Ticket. The gentle rocking of the train calmed Claire's racing heart as it picked up speed. She took in the details of the carriage, with its plush, deep red seats, brass light fixtures, and thick velvet curtains that framed the windows. The soft, golden glow from the lamps made everything look warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the misty chill outside. As she settled into her seat, she noticed the conductor making his way down the aisle. He was an older man with silver hair tucked neatly under his cap, and his dark uniform was immaculate, the brass buttons gleaming in the light. There was something almost timeless about him, like he could have been from any era. When he reached her, he paused and gave a slight bow. "Comfortable, miss?" he asked, his voice smooth and kind. Claire nodded, still feeling a bit dazed by the whirlwind of events. "I think so," she replied. "This is all a bit unexpected." The conductor's smile was gentle, but his eyes held a certain sharpness, as though he could see far more than he let on. "That's often the way it goes with the night train," he said. "Most passengers don't plan to be here. They simply find themselves at the platform when the time is right." Claire frowned slightly, trying to make sense of his words. "But where is this train going?" she asked. "I don't even know how I got here." He chuckled softly. "The night train to anywhere doesn't follow a set schedule, nor does it have a fixed destination," he explained. "It takes its passengers where they need to go, not necessarily where they want to go." Claire's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? Where they need to go? I didn't ask to be here." The conductor reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, weathered ticket. It was unlike any ticket Claire had seen before, old, frayed at the edges, and covered in faint, swirling patterns. He handed it to her, and she noticed there was no destination written on it. Instead, it was blank, save for a single phrase scrawled in elegant cursive. Your journey awaits. What does this mean? Claire asked, turning the ticket over in her hand. It's your passage, the conductor said simply. The destination isn't written yet because it hasn't been decided. You see, this train doesn't take you to where you think you should go. It takes you to where you truly need to be. Claire looked up, meeting the conductor's gaze. His eyes were piercing yet kind, like he was studying her, trying to read her thoughts. I don't understand, she admitted. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret. Many people spend their whole lives chasing what they want, never realizing it's not what they need. The night train helps its passengers find the path they might not have seen on their own. It's a journey of discovery. Claire's thoughts spun, trying to make sense of his cryptic words. But I didn't ask for this journey, she said. I was just walking, and then I found the platform. The conductor's smile didn't waver. And yet here you are, he said softly. Perhaps deep down you were looking for something more, even if you didn't know it. Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. She had been feeling lost lately, trapped in the monotony of her everyday life, searching for something she couldn't quite define. Was that why she'd wandered so far from home tonight? Had she been hoping to find an escape, a different path? She looked back down at the ticket in her hand. It felt warm, almost pulsing with a faint energy. What happens if I stay on this train? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The conductor straightened, adjusting his cap. Well, that's entirely up to you, he said. The journey can be long or short. It can be peaceful or challenging. It's different for everyone. Claire thought about this, her mind racing. And what if I decide to get off at the next stop? He tilted his head slightly, considering her. You can, of course, he said. But you might find that the next stop isn't quite what you expect. The night train only stops when it's time for a passenger to disembark. Until then, you're meant to be here. Claire swallowed hard, feeling both fear and excitement mixing in her chest. I don't even know what I'm looking for, she confessed. The conductor's eyes softened, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Most of us don't, he said gently. But that's the beauty of the journey. You don't need to know right now. All you need is the courage to take the ride and see where it leads you. He gave her a final nod before continuing down the aisle, checking on the other passengers. Claire watched him go, her thoughts whirling. Was this really happening? It felt like a dream, and yet everything around her was so vivid, so real. She leaned back in her seat, clutching the ticket in her hand. Outside the window, the mist had cleared slightly, revealing a vast, moonlit landscape she didn't recognize. The stars shone brightly, more brilliant than she'd ever seen before, like tiny diamonds scattered across the sky. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. The gentle rhythm of the train, the soft light of the lamps, and the steady pulse of her own heartbeat all seemed to sync together, lulling her into a state of calm she hadn't felt in years. When she opened her eyes again, the landscape had changed. Rolling hills covered in wildflowers spread out beneath the moonlight, and she could just make out the silhouette of a distant mountain range. It was beautiful, serene, like a painting brought to life. For the first time that night, Claire felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark in her chest. Maybe the conductor was right. Maybe she didn't need to know where she was going just yet. Maybe it was enough to simply be on the journey. She held the ticket up to the light, watching the patterns dance across its surface. Your journey awaits. It was a promise, a mystery, and an invitation all at once. With a small smile, Claire tucked the ticket into her pocket and leaned back, ready to see what the night train had in store for her. Claire wandered through the dimly lit corridors of the night train, feeling like an explorer in a mysterious new land. The gentle sway of the train was comforting now, like a slow dance lulling her into a sense of security. She glanced at the small, antique signs marking each section: dining car, observation lounge, library car. But it was a nondescript door at the end of the hallway that caught her eye, slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. Curious, Claire pushed the door open and stepped inside. The atmosphere here was different, quieter, almost sacred. This wasn't like the rest of the train. It felt heavy with an unseen energy. The air was cool, filled with a faint scent of lavender and old wood. Soft golden light streamed through tiny frosted windows, casting a warm glow on the room. Claire realized she was in a sleeper car, but unlike any she'd ever seen. The beds were lined up neatly, each one draped with delicate lace curtains that gently swayed with the motion of the train. She peered closer and noticed something unusual. Each bed held a sleeping passenger. Their faces were serene, almost blissful, as if they were lost in the most beautiful of dreams. "Why are they all asleep?" Claire whispered to herself, feeling a shiver of unease run down her spine. She stepped closer to one of the beds, hesitating before gently pulling back the curtain. The sleeper was an elderly woman, her silver hair neatly braided, her hands folded across her chest. Her face looked peaceful, as if she was smiling in her sleep. Without thinking, Claire reached out and touched the edge of the curtain. The fabric felt smooth and cool like silk. The moment her fingers made contact, a rush of wind swept through the room, and Claire's vision blurred. It felt like she was being pulled, like the floor had fallen out from beneath her feet. Suddenly she was no longer in the sleeper car. Claire found herself standing in the middle of a sunlit meadow, the sky a perfect shade of blue above her. Wildflowers of every color swayed gently in the breeze, and she could hear the faint sound of laughter. In the distance, a young woman was dancing, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched, as if she was trying to embrace the whole world. Claire took a step forward, feeling the soft grass beneath her feet, realizing that this wasn't a dream. It was a memory. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the sun felt warm on her face. It was beautiful, almost heartbreakingly so. The young woman stopped dancing and turned towards Claire, her smile wide and radiant. She was younger, but Claire recognized her immediately. It was the elderly woman from the sleeper car, Margaret. Her eyes were filled with joy, sparkling with the kind of happiness that only comes from pure, unfiltered moments of life. "Margaret?" Claire called out tentatively. The woman didn't seem to hear her. Instead, she ran towards a figure standing at the edge of the meadow, a young man with dark hair and a kind smile. He held out his arms, and Margaret leapt into them, laughing as he spun her around. They looked at each other with such love that it made Claire's heart ache. It was then that Claire understood. She was inside Margaret's memory. The sleeper car was more than a place to rest. It was a sanctuary for the passengers' most cherished moments. Here, they could live forever in the memories they held dearest, safe from the passage of time. Claire watched as the scene played out. Margaret and the young man sat down in the grass, leaning into each other, their fingers intertwined. They talked quietly, their voices low and filled with affection. Claire couldn't make out the words, but it didn't matter. The love between them was palpable, a silent story told through glances and gentle touches. As Claire stood there, a wave of sadness washed over her. This was a memory from Margaret's youth, a moment frozen in time. Claire realized that the woman she had seen in the sleeper car was reliving this day, over and over, lost in the happiness of her past. The realization struck Claire hard, like a physical blow. She thought about her own life, the things she had been running from, the regrets she had buried deep. Memories of her own flashed before her eyes, moments of laughter with friends, quiet mornings with her mother, the bitter-sweet goodbye with someone she once loved. Why had she chosen to board the night train? Was she searching for something she had lost, or was she running away from the pain of remembering? The meadow began to blur, and the wind picked up again. Claire felt herself being pulled back, the memories slipping away like sand through her fingers. She tried to hold on, but it was no use. The scene faded, and the laughter became a distant echo. Claire blinked, finding herself back in the sleeper car, her hand still clutching the edge of the curtain. The elderly woman, Margaret, lay there peacefully, a small smile on her lips. Claire took a step back, her heart heavy with emotion. She hadn't expected to be confronted with such a vivid, intimate glimpse into another person's life. The curtain swayed gently as she released it, falling back into place. Claire turned to leave, but before she could, she heard a voice, soft, almost a whisper. "Did you see?" It was the conductor standing quietly by the door. He had a look of understanding on his face. Claire nodded, her throat tight with unspoken words. "She's reliving a memory, isn't she?" The conductor gave a solemn nod. "The sleeper car holds the dreams of the passengers. Here, they can live in their most treasured memories for as long as they need." "Why?" Claire asked, her voice barely audible. "Sometimes," the conductor said gently, "it's easier to live in a memory than to face what's ahead. But not everyone belongs in the past. Some, like you, still have a journey to complete." Claire swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She had been avoiding her own life, hiding from the pain of her memories. But maybe it was time to confront them, to face what she had left behind. She turned back to the sleeping passengers, her gaze lingering on Margaret's serene face. "Will she ever wake up?" Claire asked quietly. The conductor's eyes softened. "Only when she's ready," he said. "Just like the rest of us." Claire took a deep breath, nodding slowly. She was beginning to understand. The night train wasn't just taking her to a physical destination, it was leading her on a journey of the heart, helping her uncover what she had hidden away. With one last look at the sleeper car, Claire stepped back into the corridor, ready to continue her own journey, wherever it might lead. The dimly lit corridor of the train seemed to stretch endlessly before Claire. Each door she passed held a story, an echo of a life lived or a memory cherished. It was as though the train itself was a living entity, pulsating with the energy of its passengers. Claire's footsteps were soft on the crimson carpet, the rhythmic clacking of the wheels on the tracks becoming a calming background hum. Ahead, she saw the polished wooden door labelled "Dining Car." Her curiosity piqued. Claire pushed it open, stepping into a room filled with soft golden light. The aroma of freshly baked bread and rich spiced tea filled the air, a comforting contrast to the cold, misty night outside. The dining car was elegant, reminiscent of a grand old restaurant from a bygone era. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting shimmering reflections on the glassware and silver cutlery laid out on pristine white tablecloths. But what struck Claire the most was the group of people seated around a large table in the center. There were 6 of them, each lost in their own thoughts, staring absently at their untouched food. Claire hesitated, feeling like she had interrupted a private moment. One of the passengers, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard, looked up and met her eyes. He gave a small, polite nod and gestured for her to join them. "Please, take a seat," he said, in a low, gentle voice. "It's rare to see a new face here." Claire slid into the empty chair beside him, offering a nervous smile. "Thank you. I'm Claire," she introduced herself. "Are you all traveling somewhere special?" A woman with deep lines etched into her face, her eyes hollow and tired, let out a dry laugh. "Traveling? We've been on this train for longer than we can remember," she said. Her voice was tinged with a kind of weary acceptance, as if she had long since given up on finding any destination. Another passenger, a young man with a distant, melancholic expression, spoke up. "We're the lost," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Claire frowned, confused. "The lost? What do you mean?" The middle-aged man beside her sighed and leaned back in his chair. "We boarded this train seeking something we thought we needed, something we couldn't name. But somewhere along the way we forgot what we were looking for. Now we're stuck here, unable to get off because we no longer know our destination." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. The realization that these passengers were trapped in a loop, forever traveling without a clear purpose, was unsettling. She looked around the table, studying the faces of the people seated there. Each one held a story, a life filled with moments of joy, sorrow, and longing. But now they seemed empty, detached from the world. The older woman leaned forward, her bony hands clasped together. "I used to be a dancer," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I boarded this train because I thought it could take me back to a time when I felt alive, when I could still dance. But the more I searched for that feeling, the more it slipped away. Now, I can't remember what it felt like to dance. I'm stuck here, longing for something I can't even recall." The young man spoke next, his eyes fixed on the table. "I was searching for a chance to prove myself," he murmured. "I thought if I traveled far enough, I'd find a place where I mattered, where I could be someone important. But now I've forgotten what I was trying to prove. The world outside feels like a distant dream." The middle-aged man, who seemed to be their unofficial leader, gave Claire a sad smile. "We all boarded the night train looking for something, fulfillment, purpose, love, meaning. But along the way we lost ourselves in the search. Now we're caught in this endless journey, unable to disembark, because we don't know what we're searching for anymore." Claire felt her chest tighten with a mix of empathy and fear. Could she become like them? She had boarded the night train on a whim, feeling lost and aimless after a series of setbacks in her own life. Had she already started down the same path as these passengers, wandering without direction? "What keeps you here?" Claire asked quietly. "Why don't you just get off at the next stop and start over?" The older woman shook her head. "The train doesn't stop for us anymore," she said. "It only stops for those who have a clear destination in mind. Without knowing where we want to go, we're trapped here." Claire swallowed hard. The implications of their words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She thought about her own life, about the choices she had avoided making, the dreams she had let fade away. Was she, too, on the verge of becoming one of the lost? The middle-aged man placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're not like us," he said gently. "Not yet. You still have time to figure out what you want, to find your purpose. Don't let the search consume you." Claire nodded, blinking back the sting of tears. The passengers' stories had struck a chord deep within her, awakening fears she hadn't even realized she'd been harboring. She needed to find her own path before it was too late, before she became another lost soul on this endless train. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The middle-aged man gave her a kind smile, his eyes filled with a wisdom born of experience. "Listen to your heart," he said simply. "The train takes people where they need to go, not where they want to go. Trust that it's leading you somewhere important, even if you don't understand it yet." Claire stood up, feeling a new sense of determination settle in her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I won't forget what you've shared with me." She left the dining car, casting one last look back at the table of the lost. They watched her go, their expressions a mix of hope and resignation. As the door swung shut behind her, Claire took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. She didn't know where the night train was taking her, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let herself get lost. Claire walked down the corridor, her steps more purposeful now, ready to face whatever lay ahead on this mysterious journey. Claire continued her exploration of the night train, feeling a newfound determination after her encounter with the lost in the dining car. She walked down the narrow corridor, her hand trailing lightly along the polished wood walls, feeling the gentle vibration of the moving train beneath her fingertips. Ahead of her, a heavy wooden door came into view, marked with a simple sign that read, "Carriage of Forgotten Dreams." Intrigued, Claire pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, with the soft glow of candles casting flickering shadows across the space. It was unlike any other part of the train she had seen. Instead of rows of seats or sleeping compartments, the carriage was filled with a strange assortment of objects, each one seemingly plucked from a different time and place. The first thing Claire noticed was a painter's easel, standing tall but covered in a fine layer of dust. A half-finished canvas sat on it, the brushstrokes vibrant but frozen in time. Next to it lay a musician's broken violin, its strings snapped, the bow resting beside it, as if it had been discarded in a moment of frustration. Further down, she saw a stack of old, yellowed papers, a poet's unwritten manuscript filled with crossed-out lines and scribbled words. Claire moved slowly through the room, taking it all in. It felt like a museum of abandoned dreams, a place where lost ambitions were left to gather dust. Her heart ached at the sight, imagining the people who had once held these items with hope and passion, only to abandon them when life got in the way. As she reached the center of the carriage, she noticed a small figure hunched over a wooden crate, rummaging through its contents. It was a young boy, no older than 10, with messy brown hair and a look of deep concentration on his face. "Hello," Claire said softly, not wanting to startle him. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. "Oh, hi," he replied. He seemed hesitant, as if he wasn't sure whether he was supposed to be there. "My name's Sam." "I'm Claire," she said, kneeling down beside him. "What are you looking for?" Sam's face scrunched up in confusion. "I don't really know," he admitted. "I just feel like I lost something here, something important, but I can't remember what it is." Together, Claire and Sam began sifting through the relics scattered across the room. They examined a tattered notebook filled with sketches, a pair of worn-out ballet shoes, a faded photograph of a young girl holding a trophy. Each item seemed to hold a story, a fragment of someone's forgotten dream. Claire held up the broken violin, running her fingers along the cracked wood. "Do you think this was yours?" she asked. Sam shook his head. "No, I don't think so," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. "I don't remember ever playing an instrument." Claire placed the violin back down gently. "What about these?" she asked, pointing to a stack of old comic books. Sam's eyes lit up momentarily, but then he frowned. "I used to love reading comics," he said slowly, "but I don't think I wanted to be a comic book artist." They continued searching, moving deeper into the carriage. Claire could see the frustration building on Sam's face as they uncovered item after item that didn't spark any memories for him. It was as if his own dreams had slipped away, lost among the clutter of forgotten ambitions. Claire sat down on an old wooden bench and patted the space beside her. "Sam, can you tell me anything about what you used to dream about?" she asked gently. "Anything at all?" Sam climbed up next to her, swinging his legs back and forth as he thought. "I remember I used to have a lot of dreams," he said quietly. "But then, as I got older, they started to fade away. People kept telling me to be more practical, to focus on things that mattered, like school and chores and stuff. So I stopped dreaming. I guess I just forgot." Claire's heart ached for him. She knew all too well how easy it was to lose sight of one's dreams in the face of everyday responsibilities and the expectations of others. "Maybe your dreams are still here, somewhere in this room," Claire said softly. "We just have to keep looking." Sam nodded, his expression a mix of determination and hope. He reached into a dusty trunk and pulled out a small, toy rocket ship. The paint was chipped and one of the fins was missing, but Sam held it carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "This is mine," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Claire smiled. "You wanted to be an astronaut?" Sam nodded, his eyes sparkling with a mix of joy and sadness. "Yeah, I did," he said. "I wanted to explore space, to see the stars up close. I used to spend hours staring up at the night sky, imagining all the places I could go." "What happened?" Claire asked gently. Sam shrugged, looking down at the toy rocket in his hands. "I guess I started believing that it was just a silly dream," he said. "Everyone told me it was impossible, that I needed to be realistic. So I stopped dreaming about it." Claire placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's never too late to dream again, Sam," she said. "Dreams don't have to disappear just because they seem impossible. Sometimes, the impossible dreams are the ones worth holding on to the most." Sam looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. "Do you think I could still be an astronaut one day?" Claire nodded, giving him a warm, encouraging smile. "I think you can be anything you want to be," she said. "The only person who gets to decide what your dreams are is you." Sam hugged the toy rocket tightly to his chest, a look of pure determination on his face. "Thank you, Claire," he said. "I won't forget my dreams again." As Claire watched Sam leave the carriage, his steps lighter and more confident, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. Helping Sam remember his dream had reminded her of the importance of holding on to her own. She glanced around the room one last time at all the forgotten dreams left behind by others and made a silent promise to herself. "I won't forget either," she whispered. With that, she turned and left the carriage of forgotten dreams, ready to continue her journey on the night train to anywhere. The rhythmic clatter of the night train echoed softly through the car as Claire made her way down the aisle. The once mysterious train had slowly started to reveal its secrets to her, and she felt an unexpected sense of comfort, as though it was guiding her on a path she hadn't realized she needed to take. She glanced outside the window, expecting to see the same moonlit landscape that had been her view for most of the journey, but instead, everything had gone dark. The train had entered a long, pitch-black tunnel. The windows, no longer revealing the night sky, instead reflected the inside of the car like a dimly lit mirror. Claire saw her own face staring back at her, but something about the reflection seemed off. It wasn't just her reflection, it was deeper, sharper, as if the glass was showing her more than just the surface. As she leaned closer, Claire's breath caught in her throat. The reflection of herself in the window was different. The woman staring back at her looked almost the same, but her expression was hollow, her eyes heavy with an unseen weight. Claire's reflection did not smile, did not blink, but instead watched her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "What are you?" Claire whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the train car. The reflection tilted its head slightly as if pondering the question. Then it spoke, though the lips of the reflection did not move. "I am you, Claire," it said softly, "but not the you that you show to the world. I am the version of you that you keep hidden, the one you're afraid to confront." Claire stumbled back, her heart racing. She tried to look away, but her eyes were locked on the reflection. It was like staring into a pool of deep water, realizing too late that something was lurking just beneath the surface. "You're not real," Claire said, shaking her head, trying to break free from the spell of the reflection. "This is just my mind playing tricks on me." The reflection's expression softened, almost pitying. "I am as real as your fears, your regrets, and your hidden desires," it said. "You cannot run from what's inside you, Claire. No matter how far you travel or how fast this train goes, you will always carry me with you." Claire felt a surge of anger rise up within her, a flash of defensiveness. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I've faced everything that life has thrown at me. I've made it through the worst." The reflection's eyes seemed to darken, as if it could see right through her bravado. "Have you really faced everything, Claire?" it asked. "Or have you spent your life avoiding the truth? You tell yourself that you're strong, that you're moving forward, but deep down you know that you're running. You're running from the choices you've made, from the people you've hurt, and from the person you could have been." Claire's breath came in shallow gasps. It felt as though the air in the car had grown heavy, pressing down on her chest. Memories she had tried to bury flashed before her eyes, the fight she had with her best friend before she left home, the job she quit out of fear of failure, the dreams she abandoned when she convinced herself they were foolish. Tears welled up in her eyes as she faced the reflection. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Why are you showing me these things?" "Because you need to see them," the reflection replied. "This train takes people where they need to go, not where they want to go. And right now you need to confront yourself. You need to ask yourself who you really are." Claire wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, her fingers trembling. "I thought I knew who I was," she said. "I thought I was moving forward, making a better life for myself." The reflection's gaze softened, and for the first time it looked almost compassionate. "You've been moving," it said, "but not forward. You've been drifting, Claire, like a leaf caught in the current. You've let fear steer your course, and in doing so you've lost sight of your true self." Claire closed her eyes, trying to block out the reflection's words, but they echoed in her mind like a drumbeat. She thought of the choices she hadn't made, the paths she hadn't taken. She realized that she had spent so much time running from her fears that she had never stopped to ask herself what she truly wanted from life. Slowly she opened her eyes, meeting the gaze of her reflection once more. "How do I find my way back?" she asked, her voice small but filled with a desperate hope. The reflection gave a small, sad smile. "The way back isn't behind you, Claire," it said. "It's inside you. It's in the moments you choose to be honest with yourself, to face the parts of you that you've kept hidden. It's in the courage to look in the mirror and accept everything you see." Claire took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her emotions lift slightly. It wasn't a complete relief, but it was a start. She nodded, wiping away the last of her tears. "I'm ready," she said quietly. "I'm ready to face whatever comes next." The reflection nodded, a look of approval in its eyes. "Good," it said. "Then your journey can truly begin." As the train emerged from the tunnel, the darkness faded, and the reflection in the window dissolved back into the ordinary glass. Claire looked out at the landscape bathed in moonlight, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The train's brakes hissed as it slowed to a stop, the sound echoing through the silent corridors. Claire felt the familiar jolt as the night train came to a halt, but when she looked out of the window, she was met with an unexpected sight. The station was unlike any she had seen before. It was bathed in a soft, golden glow, as though it existed in a perpetual sunrise. A sign above the platform read, in elegant script, "Second Chances." Passengers began to stir, murmuring to one another in hushed voices. The air inside the train car was charged with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Claire watched as people gathered their things, many of them with expressions that ranged from hopeful to anxious. She could sense the importance of this stop even before the conductor stepped into the car. He stood by the door, his posture straight and calm, but there was a hint of gravity in his eyes. "This is Second Chances," he announced, his voice carrying through the car. "For those of you who feel that there is something left undone, an opportunity missed, this is your stop." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She felt a rush of emotion she hadn't anticipated. The words "second chances" reverberated through her mind, conjuring memories she had thought long buried, choices she hadn't made, words she hadn't said, dreams she had set aside out of fear or practicality. She glanced at the conductor, who met her gaze with a knowing look. Passengers began to move toward the door, some hesitantly, others with purpose. A man in his 50s, his face lined with regret, stepped off the train first, looking as though he was preparing himself for a difficult confrontation. Behind him, a woman clutching a small suitcase followed, her eyes filled with tears, as if she had finally decided to confront a mistake she'd lived with for years. Claire felt rooted to the spot, unable to move. She had boarded this train on a whim, drawn by its mystery, but now she found herself at a crossroads she hadn't anticipated. The idea of getting off at Second Chances both thrilled and terrified her. What if she made the wrong decision? What if she left behind an opportunity for something greater by staying on board? And yet, the idea of stepping off to chase a lost dream seemed equally daunting. The conductor approached her, his kind yet piercing eyes studying her face. "You seem torn, Claire," he said gently. "This is a rare stop. Not everyone gets the chance to rewrite a chapter of their life. Many people stay on the train, content to keep moving forward. But for some, the chance to revisit a moment in their past is a gift." Claire swallowed hard, her throat tight. "What if I don't know what I want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The conductor tilted his head slightly, as if weighing her words. "Perhaps it's not about knowing what you want," he said. "Perhaps it's about acknowledging what you've lost. Sometimes we're given another chance, not because we need to chase an old dream, but because we need to make peace with it." His words struck a chord deep within her. Memories flooded her mind, of a relationship she'd ended too soon, a job opportunity she'd been too afraid to take, a friendship she had let slip away. The regrets she'd buried under layers of busy distractions now rose to the surface, making her feel vulnerable and exposed. A young woman in a bright yellow coat passed by, pausing to give Claire a smile. "I'm getting off," she said, her voice light yet determined. "I've always regretted not following my heart. It's time to see if there's still a chance." Claire nodded absently, watching as the woman stepped onto the platform. More passengers followed, each one carrying their own hopes and fears like invisible luggage. Claire realized that for many, this stop wasn't just about chasing a dream. It was about healing, about forgiving themselves for the choices they had made or hadn't made. The train door remained open, an invitation hanging in the air. Claire could feel the pull of the platform, the magnetic promise of a fresh start. But she also felt the tug of the unknown that lay beyond this stop, the journey that the night train had promised her when she first boarded. She looked back at the conductor, her expression torn. "If I don't get off now, will I ever have this chance again?" she asked. The conductor's face softened. "No one can say for certain," he replied. "But the night train always takes its passengers where they need to go. Trust in your journey, whatever you decide." Claire took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle over her. She could almost picture herself stepping off the train, walking toward a reunion or a long-forgotten dream. She could see the possibility of closure, of setting things right. But she could also feel the call of the train, urging her to stay, to keep moving forward into the unknown possibilities that lay ahead. She stepped toward the door, her hand gripping the edge as she looked out onto the platform one last time. The faces of the passengers who had disembarked were filled with hope and trepidation. It was a leap into the past, an attempt to mend broken threads of their lives. Claire realized that while she admired their courage, her own heart was telling her something different. Slowly, she stepped back, her decision made. "I'm staying," she said quietly, meeting the conductor's gaze. He gave her a small nod, his expression one of approval. "Very well," he said. "Then your journey continues." As the train doors closed and the night train began to pull away from the station, Claire felt a wave of peace wash over her. She had chosen to keep moving forward, to embrace whatever lay ahead rather than look back. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of clarity. Claire watched the station of second chances fade into the distance, the golden glow receding into the night. She wasn't entirely sure what awaited her, but she felt a new sense of purpose, a calm acceptance of the unknown. Perhaps, she thought, the real second chance was the choice she made in this moment, to trust the journey and herself. The lighting in the train car shifted as Claire stepped inside. A faint golden glow filtered through the dimly lit space, casting elongated shadows that danced along the walls. This car was different from the others she had seen. It felt alive. The air carried a soft hum, like a distant melody or the quiet murmur of a stream. Claire hesitated, feeling a shiver down her spine, as if the very walls were whispering secrets too faint to hear. As she moved further into the car, she noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a bench, his head tilted slightly as if listening to something no one else could perceive. He was dressed in a simple, worn suit that seemed out of time, and a white cane rested by his side. His eyes were closed, yet there was a sense of awareness about him, as though he could see more than anyone with perfect vision. Claire's footsteps slowed. She wasn't sure if she should speak, but before she could make a decision, the man turned his head toward her, a smile forming on his lips. "You're new here," he said, his voice gentle but tinged with a knowing quality. "I could hear your uncertainty the moment you stepped inside." Claire blinked, taken aback. "You heard me?" she asked, glancing around as if searching for an explanation. The man chuckled softly, the sound like the rustling of autumn leaves. "Not your footsteps, no. I can't see you, but I can hear the secrets of the train. It's been whispering about you since you boarded." Claire felt a rush of curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked, stepping closer. "And what do you mean by the train whispering?" The man's smile widened, and he patted the seat beside him. "Sit, and I'll tell you a story," he said. "My name is Elias. I've been on this train longer than I can remember, long enough to know its origins and the reason why it continues its endless journey." Intrigued, Claire sat down. She felt the subtle vibrations of the train beneath her, a rhythmic pulse that matched the gentle hum in the air. Long ago, Elias began, there was a magician, a man of great power and great sorrow. He traveled the world, bringing wonder and joy to those who watched his performances. But despite all the marvels he could create, he couldn't heal his own broken heart. You see, the magician had lost something precious, his true love, taken by the whims of fate. Claire listened intently, feeling as though she had stepped into a fairy tale. The air in the car grew cooler, as if the story itself carried the chill of a distant past. In his grief, Elias continued, the magician sought to create something extraordinary, something that could help people in a way that he never could. He poured his magic into building a train, one that could travel not just across distances but across the hidden paths of the soul. The night train to anywhere was born from his pain and his desire to give others a chance at finding what they needed most, even if they didn't know it themselves. Claire's eyes widened. You mean the train is alive? She whispered. Elias nodded, a solemn expression crossing his face. In a sense, yes. It listens, it guides, it senses the desires and fears of its passengers. It knows where you need to go, even if you haven't realized it yet. The weight of his words settled over Claire like a heavy blanket. She glanced around, half expecting the walls to pulse with life. But why? She asked. Why would the magician do this? Why create something so powerful and then let it roam the world? Elias leaned back, his sightless eyes reflecting the dim light. Because he understood something profound, he said quietly. He realized that no amount of magic could mend his own heart, but by creating the night train, he could help others mend theirs. It was his gift to the world, a way of giving people the second chances he never had. Claire felt a lump form in her throat. The story touched something deep inside her, stirring memories of her own regrets and the choices she had made that led her to this very moment. The train took on a life of its own, Elias continued. It travels where it needs to, picking up those who are lost or searching. It gives them a journey, a chance to confront their past, their fears, their unspoken dreams. It guides them, but it never forces them. The choice is always theirs. Claire looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of the weathered ticket still clutched in her fingers. She hadn't noticed until now how tightly she had been holding on to it. "And me?" she asked softly. "What does the train want from me?" Elias tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. "I can't say," he replied. "But I do know this. The train sensed a need in you, a question you haven't dared to ask yourself. It brought you here to help you find your answer, whatever that may be." The hum of the train grew louder for a moment, as if affirming his words. Claire felt a chill run down her spine, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, a sense of anticipation, of standing on the edge of a revelation. "What if I don't want to find the answer?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias reached out, gently patting her hand. "Then the train will keep moving," he said. "It will take you wherever you choose to go. But remember, it brought you here for a reason. You may not understand it yet, but the journey is just as important as the destination." Claire squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back the surge of emotion welling up inside her. "Thank you," she managed to say, "for sharing this with me." Elias smiled, a sad, wistful smile. "You're welcome, my dear," he said. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Claire rose slowly, giving Elias one last glance before she stepped away. As she moved toward the door, the whispers in the walls grew softer, like a lullaby fading into the night. She knew now that the train was more than just a vehicle. It was a guide, a silent witness to the unspoken wishes of its passengers. With a deep breath, Claire opened the door and stepped into the next car, feeling as though she was one step closer to an answer she hadn't even known she was searching for. The train rattled gently as it slowed, the rhythmic clacking of the wheels fading into a soft murmur. Claire looked out the window and felt a shiver run down her spine. The landscape outside had changed completely. Gone were the familiar sights of cityscapes or rolling fields. Instead, the tracks seemed to stretch out into the sky itself, leading directly to a shimmering horizon. It was as if they had reached the very edge of the world. "We've arrived," the conductor said quietly, appearing beside her as though summoned by her thoughts. He gave her a gentle, knowing smile. "This is the end of the line, the place where every journey concludes." Claire's breath caught in her throat. "Where are we?" she asked, pressing a hand against the glass. The scene outside was breathtaking, a cliff that dropped away into an infinite sea of stars. The sky was an indigo canvas, painted with streaks of cosmic light that shimmered and danced. It was like nothing she had ever seen before, a place that felt suspended outside of time and space. The conductor gestured toward the door of the train. "This is the edge of the world," he explained. "The tracks end here, and so does your journey on the night train to anywhere." Claire's pulse quickened. She had known from the start that this trip was leading her somewhere important, but she hadn't expected this. "What do I do now?" she whispered, her voice small in the vast silence that surrounded them. The conductor extended a hand, helping her step down onto the rocky cliff. The ground beneath her feet felt solid, but the air was thick with anticipation. She could feel the energy of this place like the charged air before a thunderstorm. It buzzed with possibility. "You have a choice to make," the conductor said, his voice soft but clear. "Every passenger who reaches this point must decide. You can return to your old life, taking with you everything you've learned on this journey, or..." He paused, looking out at the endless sea of stars. "Or you can step into the unknown." Claire swallowed hard, her gaze drifting over the cliff's edge. It seemed to drop away into a void of sparkling light, a pathway made of stardust leading to a destination she couldn't see. "The unknown," she repeated. "What's out there?" The conductor gave a gentle shrug. "I can't tell you that. No one who stepped off the edge has ever returned to share their story. It's a leap of faith, a step towards something new. It could be everything you've ever dreamed of, or something entirely unexpected." Claire turned back to face the conductor. For the first time, she noticed the lines of age and wisdom etched into his face, the way his eyes sparkled with a kindness that came from seeing countless journeys like hers. "Have you ever stepped off the edge?" she asked. A wistful smile touched his lips. "No," he admitted. "My role is to guide others here, not to take the leap myself. I found my place on this train, and it's where I'm meant to be." Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She looked out at the stars, feeling the pull of the unknown. It was beautiful, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. But then she thought of her old life. The mundane routine, the unfulfilled dreams, the fear that had kept her from taking risks. It felt like a distant memory now, a faded photograph that no longer held her in its grasp. "What if I'm not ready?" she asked, her voice trembling. The conductor's expression softened. "No one ever feels truly ready," he said gently. "But that's the nature of the unknown. It's about taking a step without knowing where it will lead. It's the ultimate act of trust, in yourself, and in the journey that brought you here." Claire closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She felt the weight of everything she had experienced on the train, the memories she had relived, the stories she had heard, the lost souls she had met. Each moment had brought her closer to this point, preparing her in ways she hadn't realized. She opened her eyes and met the conductor's gaze. "If I go back," she asked, "will I ever get another chance to make this choice?" The conductor's smile was tinged with sadness. "Perhaps," he said, "but there are no guarantees. The train's paths are unpredictable, and you might never find yourself here again." Claire looked back at the sea of stars. The pathway of light seemed to beckon her, calling her forward. She could feel the pulse of the universe, the heartbeat of something far greater than herself. It filled her with a sense of wonder, a feeling she hadn't experienced since she was a child. She took a step closer to the edge, her toes curling over the precipice. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying with it the scent of distant rain and the taste of possibility. For a moment she stood there, suspended between two worlds, her old life and the unknown future that lay ahead. The conductor stepped back, giving her space. "Whatever you choose," he said softly, "know that the journey itself has changed you, and that's something no one can take away." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of release. She turned to the conductor one last time, nodding in silent thanks. Then, without another word, she took a deep breath and stepped forward. The world around her dissolved into a cascade of light, and she felt herself falling, or maybe flying. It was impossible to tell. There was no fear, only the sensation of being held by the very fabric of the universe. The conductor watched her disappear into the starlit void, his expression one of quiet pride. He knew she had made her choice, and it was the right one. He turned back toward the train, feeling the familiar hum of the engine under his feet. The night train to anywhere had another journey to begin, another soul to guide toward their own edge of the world. As the train pulled away, the cliffside shimmered in the moonlight, a silent witness to the moment when one life ended and another began. And for Claire, the adventure was only just beginning. Claire stood at the edge of the cliff, staring into the vast sea of stars that stretched infinitely before her. The soft murmur of the train had faded into the background, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The horizon shimmered like a cosmic curtain, inviting her to step through, yet the choice was hers alone. The conductor watched her with a kind but distant gaze, sensing the weight of the moment. "This is it," he said gently. "The final stop. Your journey has led you here to this choice. Whatever you decide, know that there is no right or wrong, only what feels true to you." Claire glanced back at the train, its windows glowing warmly in the night. She thought of the faces she had met along the way, the lost, caught in their cycles of searching, the boy who had forgotten his dreams, and the blind man who could hear the secrets of the train. Each encounter had taught her something new, peeling back layers she didn't even know existed. And then there was the reflection she had seen in the tunnel, a version of herself she barely recognized, full of fears and regrets. It had been painful to confront, but necessary. Now, as she stood on the precipice, she felt lighter, as if she had left behind the pieces of herself that no longer served her. "What if I step off and it's all just nothing?" she asked, her voice wavering. The conductor's smile was soft. "The unknown can be terrifying," he admitted, "but it can also be beautiful. It's the birthplace of every new beginning, every dream you've yet to imagine." Claire took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs. For a moment she closed her eyes and thought of her old life, the monotonous days, the safe routines, the dreams she had put on hold out of fear. It wasn't a bad life, but it felt small now, constricted. Could she really go back after everything she had experienced on the night train to anywhere? Her gaze drifted back to the stars. They seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched her own heartbeat, a silent call from the universe. It was as if the sky itself was waiting, ready to embrace her if she took the leap. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Good," said the conductor, stepping back. "That means you're on the brink of something extraordinary. The greatest choices in life are the ones that make us feel both fear and excitement. It's how we know they matter." Claire looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "For everything." The conductor gave a nod, tipping his hat in farewell. "Whatever you choose, Claire, know that this journey was never about the destination. It was about finding the courage to choose your own path." With a final deep breath, Claire turned back to the cliff's edge. Her toes curled over the precipice as she looked out at the endless expanse of stars. The world held its breath, suspended in a moment of pure possibility. And then she made her choice. The series leaves us at this crossroads, allowing us to decide. Did Claire leap into the unknown, embracing the call of the stars and a new beginning? Or did she return to the world she knew, forever changed by her journey, but ready to live with a newfound sense of purpose? The answer is up to you, dear reader. What would you choose if you found yourself at the edge of the world? At the end of this journey, Claire faces a choice: to step into the unknown and embrace a new beginning, or to return to her familiar life, forever changed by her experiences. Now it's your turn. What would you do if you were standing at the edge of the world? Would you take the leap into the unknown, or turn back to what's familiar but safe? Let us know your answer and why in the comments below.